is the Bible. Now, I do hope that for you young people, anyone under 15 in the room, I hope that you've got yourselves a piece of paper and a nice sharp pencil, because you may like to take down some of the verses that we talk about tonight. They may help you. The reason I'm saying that to you young people especially, is because some of us who are old and crusty are no longer of any use in this subject. The government has pretty much not got a use for us in the event that there's any sort of political pressure. However, you're coming into it. You're coming into that situation. And there are societies where that situation is already the case. We have brethren in Ukraine. We have brethren in Russia. We have brethren in Turkey. We have brethren in Pakistan. We have a number of brethren around the world in hotspots, and they have to ask this question. It's an important question, and it's one which we have to know for ourselves. And you're going to be able to contribute tonight and tell me some things which I maybe don't even mention. So, should Bible believers have anything to do with politics? Well, let's look at the question. That's the question we're investigating. So, what we're looking at now is this idea of voting. We're looking at joining a party. We're looking at being an elected representative. We're looking at joining demonstrations. We're looking at joining pressure groups. I want you to tell me, out of all of those, why? Why would we do it? Why do you think we would join some sort of a political group or take part in a political process? Why do you think we would do that? What are the reasons for that?
Make a change.
Great. To make a change. Excellent start. Great start. Anything else?
To represent interests.
To represent interests. We're now entering the head of someone who thinks that we should have something to do with the political process. Why else would I join a political process in one of those ways that we've got up there?
We believe in what they're doing.
To fulfill, sorry, English teacher, to fulfill a belief. That's actually a very important one in terms of political process. People are very, very driven by their beliefs. Anything else?
You disagree with the government.
Now, for those of you who are taking notes, if you're younger, GOVT is a common abbreviation for government. So to get a change in government. Yep, to change the government. Anything else?
Ego.
Wow, there we go. Ego. Explain what ego is to us, Ruben, if we don't know.
Oh, in the original sense, just sort of me.
All about me. It's about me. I am the saving of this country, whatever. Katura. Power. We've got a really nice smattering there. I'm not going to ask for any more suggestions unless someone has something really pressing, but that really covers a good array of reasons why we would be involved in politics. To make a change, to represent interests, to fulfill a belief that we have, to get change in the government, for ego, that we believe we are the ones who are going to solve this problem, to get power, And in fact, this here, this last one is a really good suggestion, Keturah, because we see a lot of authoritarian powers taking control in the world today. We've got one already who's invaded Ukraine, Putin. We've got another who's looking pretty authoritarian in Turkey. His name's Erdogan, or Erdogan, looks like on paper. We've got a number around the world. Iran has an authoritarian regime. These are people who want to make, they believe that they are the saving of their society. So, to put it in a really broad nutshell, what's that? To put it in a nutshell, I should say, and to put it really broadly, why we do this, why people would do this is because they believe that government is, and I'm quoting here, Abraham Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address, okay? And he said, government is of the people, it's by the people, and it's for the people. That's a famous president in the United States. So we want to make an improvement through our involvement in the government, because we believe that this government, whatever it happens to be, this system, this society is run by us. Well, that guy in charge or that lady in charge, they're there because of us. All right? Now, that's important. And that's one of the constituents. That's one of the things that makes up the last stage in human history. I wonder what I'm talking about. The last stage in human history. Where is a really good example and representation of that last stage in human history? Daniel chapter 2. There's a statue. What are the feet of the image? Travis, what are the feet of the image made up of? Iron mixed in with clay. Bits of iron mixed in with clay. Doesn't work, does it? Well, where's the first mention of clay in the Bible? Genesis. Who's the first thing, or what should I say is the first thing made of clay? Adam. So, if the feet of the image are made of clay, what do you think the feet of the image are representing? Zipporah, what do you think? Men. Well done. Well done. Brilliant. There's a system which is about men, and it's got bits of strength in it. The strength is the iron, right? Now, I'm going to give you a lesson right now, and Beulah, we were talking about this in the seminars recently. The Greeks had a term. Some people would call it demon, as your father, used to say. Demos, the demos. The demos was a word that meant the people who could vote. Yeah? Makes sense? Now, krase, or in Greek, it's looks like that. Krates. Democrates. rule of the demos. They control things according to that system. And that's the rule that we have today. And that's the feat of the image of Daniel, of Nebuchadnezzar's image in Daniel chapter 2. So, we shouldn't be surprised, pardon me, that we are here now, because that makes complete sense according to Daniel's Nebuchadnezzar's image. All right? We're in that stage now. It's a rule by men. It's a rule, to quote Abraham Lincoln, it's a rule of the people, it's a rule by the people, and it's a rule for the people. And that's where we are today. Now, why would we do this? Why would we have a system which is Greek? Which doesn't go back to the Bible, it goes back to Greece. Because we want rights for everybody. We want rights for all people in the world. And I've taken that off the Human Rights Commission, and they call it Campaign 75. And that is the current campaign which they have, which is online at the moment. They say equity. They want freedom. They want justice for all. Wonderful. Wonderful ideals. And in fact, I would argue that that's the ideal of everybody. Everybody has their own version of that. Everybody wants that. Or so they say. Everybody. Even the most authoritarian rulers want the best for their people. So it's kind of, you can see the sense in it, can't you? So here's the particular what they call the action plans for, there's 4 action plans they have. They have the plan for making education safer, reflecting on progress and renewing commitments to gender equality. Now, education and gender equality is feminism in the second case, and all kind of what's called the rainbow community in the first case. The Universal Declaration of a Catalyst for Environmental Human Rights Action. That's basically, I've looked into it, and what that is that they are supporting societies which are being devastated by climate. Great ideals, great ideals. Designing transformative solutions for disability inclusion. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. The problem with it is one thing. Not one recognition is given in all of this stuff to God. Yet, the ideals seem to be coming from God. It was God who asserted that all men and women were created. How were they created? Can anyone think? Shoot over to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. This is for those of us who have never made a mark in our Bibles. I would get a colored pencil and I'd underline this verse here, because this tells you a lot about why God and what conditions God made for men, or made men in, and men and women. Okay? Genesis chapter 1 then, and verse 26. And could we have Matthew in a very loud voice? Would you mind reading that for us, please?
And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth."
Excellent. Let us make man in our image. What God is saying is we, man and women, are made in the image of God. We have a divine origin. We are modeled on a divine being, God himself. We're modeled on that. We think, or we have the capacity to think, would be a better way of putting it. We have the capacity to think like God, given the right circumstances. Given the right circumstances. Yet, here we are trying to go it ourselves alone. So all of these ideals, for better or worse, they all strive for one thing, and that's that everybody is catered for and is cared for. The trouble is that they're misguided. What did God say? And what is the difference then between this, what's up on the board now, or Abraham Lincoln's intentions, and, for example, the intentions of Abraham Lincoln are linked also to the French Revolution. French Revolution was liberté, égalité, et fraternité. Liberty, equality, fraternity. And it's no surprise, or should be no surprise, that what we looked at from Abraham Lincoln was very similar to the French Revolution, because the French Revolution wanted to do the same thing. Everybody wants to do the same thing. In fact, a very early Bible story is about man trying to unify, to get together, to build a tower which reaches to heaven, and for everybody to be together in that. So it's been a long-standing thing, which goes way, way back into the mists of time in human history. But that tower fell for one reason alone: God was not involved. Now I want to switch, and I want to contrast what we looked at before with God's principles. His principles, and we're going to unpick this a little bit now. His principles are these: that he rules in the kingdom of men, or kingdoms plural, if you like. Secondly, that he has his own political manifesto or political claim or strategy, I guess is a better word, that is unfolding slowly. And he actually gives us a marker. He says, in the Bible, he says, look, here's my political manifesto. This is what's being undertaken. And oh, by the way, you can see it unfolding before your very eyes if you look into prophecies. If you look into the prophecy, you will see this political manifesto. It's already unfolding now. You're going to be there? You make the choice. The political manifesto doesn't stop. It's still going on. It's still rolling on. And that's where it's different to, say, a democracy like New Zealand, where we have to vote every 3 years for a new government. And nobody really cares about anything that happens in 20 years because they just want to get in for the next 3 years. Well, God's manifesto is moving on regardless. It's rolling on. So that's his political manifesto. And we'll look into a little more detail in a minute. And so we are called on to be a part of it by following the example and the teaching of Jesus Christ. Not only Jesus Christ, but all of the men who built up to the point of his ministry in the first century, because he is bedded solidly in Old Testament teaching. Right. We're going to have to move on because I'm looking at the time and we don't want to keep ourselves up too late. Now, I have put up there a couple of quotes, and I've kept to Daniel. I've kept to one book for a couple of reasons. It shows how themes in books are an important thing. And I reckon the theme of the book of Daniel is not prophecy. It's not prophecy. The theme of the book of Daniel is this. It's this word, Did I spell that right? Sovereignty. It's about who controls the earth, who controls the world, who controls the empires in the world. That's what the book of Daniel is about. It's about sovereignty. Now, to establish that, we're going to briefly skim through a couple of verses. They're up on the board for you. And by the way, at the bottom of that, the motivation for this is my misquote of Abraham Lincoln, and I've deliberately misquoted it. God wants a government which is by him, by him, and it's for him. That's the misquote of Abraham Lincoln. You see, that's where he got it wrong. But let's have a look at it now. Okay, so Daniel chapter 4 and verse 30. Malachi, please read that for us. A very loud voice if you are called on to read, please. Thank you.
The king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?
Thank you. That establishes it. King of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and he says, this is what I have built to establish my sovereignty. And there is a change which comes. Now let's go over to chapter 4 and verse 17. So it's back a bit. This is where the king is saying why he built Babylon. But I want you to come back to verse 17. So Sharon, I wonder if you would read that for us, please.
This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the Holy One, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men.
Excellent. God is in control. Not only is he in control, but he's actually setting up over it the basest, it says, the basest of men. So Daniel chapter 4, verse 17. Oh, and if we don't get the point, by the way, because Nebuchadnezzar, remember, says, this is great Babylon, I have built it, it's to establish my sovereignty over everything. Oh, if we don't get the point, we go to verses 17, verse 24, verse 28. Every one of them says the same thing. That's the theme of the book of Daniel. It's about sovereignty. It's about a government of Yahweh, by Yahweh, for Yahweh. Okay. So, by the way, Daniel's not the only book to deal with that. There are a number of other narratives in the Old Testament which also deal with it. Just briefly, before we go on to the next bit, can anyone remember any other story that they can think of in the Old Testament? You may have to go a lot earlier than Daniel, where this idea of who is in control is worked out. Anyone? Israel coming out of Egypt. Thank you very much for that. That's a brilliant example, actually, because Pharaoh says, who is Yahweh that I should obey him? Okay? So it's exactly the same point, and he learns, doesn't he? So I want to just draw one conclusion from what we've looked at there, from those verses there. Firstly, God is in control. This is what the Bible presents. His plan and his purposes are being worked out. Non-involvement, then, in a system which is failing or is about the here and now without God, it's a positive, and it can be a deliberate statement. It's something we are stating. I'm not involved in this, in your system, in your demos, in your egocentric, in your fulfilling of your beliefs. I'm not involved in that because I'm a part of another system. Non-involvement is deliberate and it's positive, and non-involvement is complete subjection to something else, another order. Okay, so when we as Bible believers say that we don't take part in some of the things that we've looked at, the political involvement, when we do that, we are actually taking a stand. Now, I have lived in countries where that's illegal to do, and you have to pay a fine to do that. And Christadelphians do pay a fine, for example, in Australia, for not voting. But what they are actually doing is they are saying in that, I belong to another political order altogether. I vote for Christ because he can make a true change. And in fact, he's in the process of doing that right now, or at least God is in the process of doing that right now. Now, I want to just now come to God's political manifesto. What is it for us? And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of verses. We're going to now look at Matthew chapter 6 and verses 9 to 10. Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 to 10. Right, in Matthew chapter 6. Now, Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 to 10 is probably, if you read this, and especially for you younger ones, if you read this, you'll look at it and you'll think, oh, I know those words. In some cases, you might even know them off by heart. Can anyone tell me the name of this passage the name that we give to this passage? Yes, again, Katura. I didn't hear you. What did you say, Zippy? Yeah, you're right. Okay, right. Thank you, Katura and Zippy. The Lord's Prayer. It's the Lord's example prayer, his exemplar for us. Now, have a look at the words. This prayer is not about just the here and now. This prayer shows you and shows me that we are part of a growing, ongoing system. We are part of something which is not just about now, today. It is about today, but it's not just about today. It continues right into the future. Have a look at it. Verses 9 and 10 of Matthew chapter 6. Verses 9 and 10. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now, notice we don't stop there. We don't just say, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now give me the food I need and the shelter I need and so on and the comfort I need. We don't say that at all. But like coupled or attached to that, it's another clause that comes. And this is a really important one because this shows us the ongoingness of this prayer. Here it is. Thy kingdom come. Thy kingdom come. Or in the Greek, it says, come thy kingdom. And this is really important because it's not just identifying where God lives and says, you're in heaven and that's lovely. And then we're all going to go there. It says, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. That's God's political manifesto. He wants that will that is done in heaven. He wants that to be done also on earth. It's as clear as your nose is on your face. That's what Christ says. He says, I want the day to come when your kingdom spreads your will from heaven, where you dwell, to earth, where we are and we exist. So it's a really important clause in that prayer, and it shows God's political manifesto for us. Now, there was no surprise that Christ should say this, actually, because he says it at least twice and a number of times in the Old Testament. And we're just going to go there now to Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14. If you pop over to Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 14. And there's a reason why I go to Habakkuk. Some of you are going to be looking up Habakkuk and thinking, why does he pick the one prophet that's really hard to find and has a big long name? Well, it's good that we know where he lies. And he's in the minor prophets, and you'll find him just after Micah and Nahum. Or what do we say? Nahum, something. So look for Nahum and look for Micah, and you'll find Habakkuk there lying just after. Now, I want you to pop over to Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14. And can I have anyone from that row down behind Matthew and Malachi, anyone from that row who is there right now in Habakkuk, to read that in a really nice loud voice for me? Someone there? You won't find it in Tintin. Okay, so good as he is, he just doesn't help us right now. Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14, just after Micah and Nahum.
For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Okay, there's the second simple statement by God, which is his political manifesto. That's what he wants to happen. You'll also find it reiterated in Numbers chapter 14 and verse 21, which is like an oath. As the earth is filled with the, as it reads in the Hebrew, as the earth is filled, and it's kind of like an intention. It's the reason I don't go to Numbers, but always go to Habakkuk, because the Habakkuk one states it as a goal, as an ideal. Right, so we'll come on and just look then at God's own political manifesto. Oh, but it's not just for God, it's for us. And we're going to briefly skim through those. God's intention is, come over to Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44 and 45. I want you to turn this up because this is a lovely verse. And this is another verse which I would say, underline it. Commit it to memory. It's a brilliant verse because it's about what Daniel is. I said it was about sovereignty, and here it is. It comes right on the back of the Nebuchadnezzar's image, and here it is. Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. Can we just swing right along that row and go to you three girls there? And is one of you in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44 and 45? Thank you, Keturah. Yep.
And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For so much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure.
Great. See that? The dream is certain, interpretation is sure. Now, I don't know about you, but when I have a dream, it's not certain. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense often. some people would argue I don't make sense when I'm awake as well. But the dream is certain is a statement that the dream is something which is going to happen. And here's the intention of this prophecy, that in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom, which, by the way, was a brilliant little oratorio also penned by Brother Isla Collier some time ago. That is an absolutely fantastic statement from Daniel. Now, one thing that Daniel does, and we're going to deliberately pick up the pace now, but you can write these down to look at in your own time. Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 to 14 mentions one like the Son of Man. One like the Son of Man. We might think, well, that's okay. That's one like the Son of Man means it's a long Bible way of saying man, a man. But no, it's got more significance than that, because the Jews, right to their face, Jesus says in Matthew 26, verse 64, look it up because it's great. You can write down, if you're interested, you can write down Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14, and you can connect that when you come to Matthew chapter 26 and verse 64. Right, from you three girls, could I have Matthew chapter 26, please? Matthew chapter 26, the third reading on that. Now, hang on a minute. 46? I got the wrong verse. This is what happens when...
64.
26, 64. Yes, it is. It's right, yep. I was in the wrong chapter. Brilliant. Can I have one of you girls, one of you three, please reading verse 26 for us? Nice, really loud voice. Verse 64.
Jesus said unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven.
Excellent. Excellent. You'll see the Son of Man coming. See, that picks up the Daniel phrase and it uses it of Jesus himself. And he's saying, I'm the fulfillment of that. So if you want to enter the kingdom of God, you need to be in me. I am the Son of Man. Daniel saw the Son of Man. And yes, it was a phrase about, one like the Son of Man. So it's a man, but it's also a title which is used by Jesus of himself. And when will this be? Well, this is probably one of the crucial passages in Acts chapter 3 in verses 19 to 21. And we're going to finish off the little trinity of girls down here. And will the last one please read for us just verses 19 to 21.
We cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. So when they had further written them, they let them go, finding nothing how they might punish them, because of the people for all men glorify God, that which was done.
Excellent. That tells us when it will be. And in fact, it will be when Christ returns to the earth. So, the next conclusion that we make, conclusion to principle number 2. God's will is to set up a kingdom over all the earth. The kingdom will reign over all other kingdoms. It will subdue all other kingdoms. It will last forever. And the Son of Man, Jesus himself, he identified himself, didn't he? He will be the king. Okay. Now, time is moving on, and we are going to just very briefly skim through these. Okay, the example of Jesus is consistent with this. He says in Luke chapter 20, in verse 25, he says to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. God. So, what he's saying is that there are some things which pertain to this life, this world now, and there are other things which pertain to God. Well, what we've seen is that God has a parallel program. What it's kind of like is this. If I could draw it. No, I'm not going to be able to draw it. Right, you're going to watch the whiteboard unfold here with my two hands. Here is man's kingdom. This is running along down through time. God has a parallel plan in place. When we are baptized and we say we believe in that kingdom, these things that are happening here no longer apply to us. Because what we are doing is essentially we are entering a kingdom. Well, since it's already been promised, remember that dream we said? The dream said these things are certain. So since it's already happening, we're entering that kingdom. We're a part of that order of things, not of the order of things which is about the image, Nebuchadnezzar's image. So that kingdom is rolling along, it's unfolding, and it's already begun. The process is already there. And it's not our subject tonight, but we could go to a number of prophecies that show us that that kingdom is rolling along. So render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Don't serve two masters. You can't serve one master and also parallel to that serve the other master. And sorry, jumping ahead of myself. And let's come to John chapter 18 and verse 36. It's up on the board. John chapter 18, verse 36. John chapter 18, verse 36. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight that I should not be delivered to Jews. But now is my kingdom not from here, not from hence." But you need to contrast that. And what I've got beside my little, I've got a little note in my Bible beside that verse, and here it is. It's from Matthew 28, verse 18, and it's up on the board for you. Jesus had all power and authority vested in him by God. What does that tell you? That tells you absolutely, with all certainty, that his kingdom wasn't of this order. It wasn't about voting. It wasn't about rights. It was about subservience to God's will. And that is the difference. So I think that the Matthew 28 quote, beside that John 18 quote, really show us something important about Jesus' own attitude to his kingdom. Whilst he was given all power and authority, he said, "My kingdom's not of this world." So obviously his kingdom wasn't. In the next passage that we're looking at is the Sermon on the Mount. And we're just going to very quickly skip through these because we've only got a short time left. Right, the Sermon on the Mount has some interesting things to say to us, which we could apply to this question now. Should we vote in a general or a local election or join a political party? Well, here's what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. You can turn it up if you like, but we're just going to very quickly skim through it now. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be. What's the purpose of unions? Does anyone know? Why do we have unions?
Protect the interests of all.
To protect the interests of all people in that company or in that group or in that profession. That's exactly why we have unions. They protect the interests of that. Yet, if you are saying that God is actually my king and that Jesus Christ will be on the throne in Jerusalem, then your rights are with God, not with the union. Not protected by the union, but protected by God. Should we become an elected representative? Absolutely and totally not. No one can serve two masters. You can't serve God and mammon. Mammon is an old Bible word for wealth, money, wealth. You can't serve God and wealth. And should we join political demonstrations or pressure groups? Now, this is something which you, young people, are going to be or are already challenged in. This is something which you are going to be asked to do constantly. As time rolls on, as you get older, and as things get more and more developed in society where pressure groups have become important, you will be asked to join pressure groups. That goes right down, to my mind, right down to, for example, joining Greenpeace. Wonderful ideals of Greenpeace. Save the whales. Save the fur seals. Great. Save the forests. Lovely. Also, support the Palestinians against Israel. That's also their stance. Makes you think, doesn't it? So, that's where we lie. Now, I just wanted to look at what Paul says, and he has some wonderful words to say about where our true citizenship is. Just come over to Philippians chapter 3 and verses 16 to 21, and we're going to finish here, by the way, so I'd appreciate you going there. So if you could go over to Philippians chapter 3 and verses 16 to 21. This is what the Apostle Paul says. Philippians chapter 3, verses 16 to 21. Right. Nevertheless, whereunto we have already attained, let us walk by the same rule and let us mind the same thing. Okay, this is for everyone now. This is for all of us. Okay, we're a part of this. Here's what he says. Brethren, be followers together of me, and mark them which walk so as you would have us for an example or example. For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you, even weeping, that they are enemies of the cross of Christ. Now, at the time, we should know, at the time, there was a lot of political pressure. If you were taken to the courts, the authorities said, right, we want you to curse Christ. If you can curse Christ, then you obviously aren't a part of that group and you'll go free. Oh, but if you don't curse Christ, if you say that Christ is your Lord, oh, well, you're going to be killed. That was the choice. Pretty stark, wasn't it? And so that's the setting for Paul's words to the Philippians. So these people who had repudiated the way, what they were doing is they were basically bowing to that immense pressure, which was building and building and building. There were a couple of emperors who were particularly bad in that respect. So, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is their shame, and who mind earthly things. Well, that's what you do if you want to support your own rights. You mind earthly things. For our, and it says conversation in the authorized version, and if you're reading an authorized version, you might want to scribble on the side there, citizenship. which is the true meaning of the Greek word. Our citizenship is in heaven, from whence we look for a Saviour, the Lord Jesus Christ. Our citizenship is in heaven. It's not from here. It's from somewhere else. And so don't buckle to that pressure. So that's really all we want to look at for now. But what I would like to do is I'd like to ask you for your either questions, and I'll do this now, Jesse, if that's okay. Thank you. For your questions or comments that you may have about what we've been talking about. We've laid out very broad principles, but that was on purpose. It's so that we could kind of set the parameters. The boys are interested in that. Should we turn it off? There we go. So here's an example of where some of us have had real life experiences. I can remember when I started work and I had to, as a teacher, join the teachers' union. And the only way that I got exemption was by going to a tribunal, and I had to get an exemption card to actually work in the job. So that's an experience where I've had a very, very light touch with tribunals. Some people in Australia are already having to face tribunals. Any questions or comments that you might have? Can anyone think of an example of somebody who might have suffered a life and death situation about making the choices that we have been talking about? Yes, Katura.
She said Daniel.
Daniel, good Bible character, and yes, he suffered the same thing as we've been talking about tonight. It was a life and death choice. Anyone else?
Wasn't there a German brother who got executed?
Yes, there was. And I think Hans and Gabi can tell us something about that.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Brother Meltz? Yep. And he went to the guillotine, I believe. Right. Yes. So he was guillotined by the Nazi regime because he would not fight. You're absolutely right, Warren. Anything else?
There was the brother in Canada who was written about a test case where the same thing with conscientious objection, but because it was World War I, they didn't have conscientious objection.
Right.
And so he had to go and join the army and be shipped over to Europe.
Right. So he was a brother in Canada during World War I, and he was shipped off to Europe because they didn't have such a thing as conscientious objection at the time. Is that right, Matthew? Yep. And so there is a situation where, we're under pressure and you have to make a choice. And, well, in fact, in his case, there was probably no choice.
South African brother, and what's his name over in Whitewood?
Stuart Ackerman.
Yeah, Stuart Ackerman.
Stuart Ackerman. Yep. Okay, so these are people who have, and South Africa was particularly bad at one time. When you were in shorts, Sean, probably it would have been the time when there was a lot of pressure on South Africans, and they had to join up at a certain age. What was the age in South Africa? 16, was it? Do you remember? 18, yep, and joined the armed forces. And the brethren, what did they do in that case? You don't know. Right.
Either worked for the government or went to prison.
Right. So they were given other work to do. Yeah. Okay. Now, we haven't had that for many, many years. Some of our families have been in internment camps because they refused to fight. However, we can't rely on that being forever the case. And so it's really good for us to get these principles now solidly fixed in our minds, what we believe and what we have always stood for. Okay, thank you.
Right, I'd like to thank our brother Ross for his words tonight, and I'd invite you all to stay and enjoy a cup of tea or cup of coffee and light refreshment afterwards. We'll close our time together by singing the words of hymn 274, after which Brother Paul Vogel will close in prayer. Christ the King is coming to set up his throne, royal Son of David in the world unknown. He with might and power will return again, not as lowly Jesus, but as King of men. Hymn 274.
O great and mighty God, eternal Father, you who dwell in the heavens above, from age to age, and as you have left on record for us your word, and we thank the Heavenly Father that we can come aside and we can open your word and we can have our minds enlightened concerning your purpose, that you will yet fill this earth with your glory as the waters cover the sea. And this night, Heavenly Father, as we've considered two ways, the ways of man and man's governments, when man turned from thee to establish his own ways upon the earth. And at the very foundation of the world, you promised dominion. You would build a kingdom, provide a wonderful king who would rule on your behalf. And you have called us with a heavenly calling. You made these things known unto us and asked us to be part of your purpose, and made all the arrangements that you and Holy God we could draw nigh to and daily prepare, be part of that great and glorious kingdom. Help us, each one of us, both young and old, to daily prepare for your kingdom to come. And daily we might pray for it in a time when your King, the Son of Man, will receive that dominion and descend to the earth and establish your kingdom, your wonderful kingdom, based on your character and your righteous ways. And all men will know peace at last and will rise up to honour thee when they rise up in the morning to offer unto thee praise in your kingdom. We thank you for your goodness to us, this graciousness that you bestow, as we thank you for daily provisions now, the blessings of our time together around food and drink. Be with us, Heavenly Father, we pray. Strengthen us in your ways, for thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, both now and in the ages to come, through your Son. Amen.